Hello, this is Mike Regan, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this brief on-the-record interview with our longtime friend and parcel expert, Jerry Hempstead. And Jerry, there's a lot going on, so I'd like to welcome you and get your thoughts on some various things affecting parcel shippers.
Well, as always, it's an exciting time in the parcel industry as we go into the rate raising season.
Yeah, well, let's jump right into it. We don't need to get into a lot of specifics, Jerry, but as we wanted to alert our audience in the 2-minute warning, we've seen some unusual activity, and one of which is FedEx's recent announcement of taking a general rate increase, the GRI of 6.9%. I guess that's the largest GRI that's ever been announced. And that comes on the heels of some news that FedEx made when they had their recent analyst or call with the financial analyst. Can you walk us through what's going on in the market and some of the factors that may have driven FedEx's general rate increase?
Well, the most recent FedEx earnings announcement came with a pre-announcement that their volume had fallen off. They're blaming the economy for the fall off in volume, and they're going to make up for this shortfall in volume coming in by raising rates a little bit more than they have in the past. By a little bit more, let's give you a little history. We went 10 years at 4.9% each year for 10 years. The last 2 years, 21 and 22, they raised it 5.9%. And now we are going into 2023. Let's try 6.9% and blame it on inflation. So I think some of the volume decline at FedEx is self-inflicted. You know, they, for example, walked away from UPS, they walked away from Amazon's business and conceded it to UPS before COVID began. So they missed out on that. But both UPS and FedEx enjoyed 2 years of prosperity, that the package volume went up every month due to COVID as we became more and more comfortable ordering stuff online, and the volume was there. And as you know from history, there's one thing that hides a poor operator, and that's volume.
Yeah.
If the salespeople are bringing in the volume, it hides all kinds of sins. When the volume starts to drop, especially when you've got a huge fixed network like FedEx and UPS, it's really hard to take the costs out or take it out as rapidly as the revenue is disappearing. And so what do you got to do? You got to raise rates. Now, will there be a consequence from this rate increase driving shippers away or looking for alternatives? Probably. We haven't heard from UPS yet. I expect an announcement from UPS at the end of this month. They were right around October 30th last year. So then we'll be able to compare and contrast two things. One is the volume at UPS compared to FedEx and the Postal Service. And then number two, their announced rate increase compared to FedEx. But now that FedEx had already broadcast what they're doing, which is fairly large, there's no reason why UPS shouldn't follow in lockstep like they have in the past. But UPS could do something a little different this time out.
Okay, well, Jerry, one of the other things that is kind of noteworthy is the fact that you sent along some information with a kind of a little heads up, which is really what precipitated this kind of spur of the moment call. And that's on the accessorial charges. A lot of folks are focused on the 6.9%, but you sent me a schedule showing that many of the accessorial charges, are double digit, well above 10%, 18, 20% even in some instances.
Correct. And so you take a look at what's driving the parcel industry for the last couple of years. It's home delivery, right? So the base rate is going to go up 6.9% on average. The residential surcharge for home delivery is going up 8%. It's not going up 6%. It's going up 8%. So now you got to add those two together. And then on compounding that, they have a fuel surcharge on the base rate and the accessorial charge. So, and the ground fuel surcharge for FedEx at the moment is 17%. So you see how rapidly a shipper's bill is going to increase if they're not paying attention.
Well, that brings me to point number 3, which has been something that you've been very, very good at helping us understand on the various interviews. And that is the Jerry Hempstead, everything is negotiable approach to your contract negotiations with FedEx, UPS, and the United States Postal Service. Are you suggesting that, perhaps this is an area where shippers ought to really hone in on? And if so, what would they need? What type of data would they need in order to have meaningful chances of having their negotiations succeed?
Well, they need to know their book of business. So what is their usage of services? Ground service, home delivery service, next day air service, second day air service, third day air service. They need to know their distribution by zones, because some of the rate increases, some of the bigger rate increases are for the further away zones.
Really?
And so if you are a longer zone shipper, you're going to be hit with more of an increase than a short zone shipper. So you need to know the zone distributions, the service distribution, and then your weight distribution. So let's talk about the lightweight packages. It's severely affected by the minimum charge. So the carriers impose a minimum charge. The minimum charge went up extraordinarily this year. The 1 pound zone 2 rate, which sets the minimum charge for FedEx, was $9.36 before fuel. It's now going to, for the first time, going to break the $10 threshold, and it'll be $10.10 again before fuel. So what a shipper that has, for example, negotiated a really big percentage off, they still have to pay the minimum charge. So they don't get any discount if they haven't negotiated a discount on the minimum charge. If the minimum charge negotiated in the past was a flat dollar amount, so let's say you got $2 off the $10.10. Now last year was what, 9.30 something. If you just negotiated a dollar amount off, when the rates go up, you take 100% of that increase, unless you haven't negotiated a GRI cap. So even though they're announcing 6.9, you have to take that. Well, that's a negotiable number. And so you can negotiate that I'm willing to take 5%, I'm willing to take 4%, I'm willing to take 3.5%. I'm not going to take the 6.9%. And that will mute some of the effect of the minimum charge, for example. But FedEx and UPS have not become shy about raising rates anytime they feel like it. And that's really bad news for shippers. And so shippers should not feel any qualms about, even in the middle of a contract, calling in the carriers and say, no, we need to negotiate this. You're killing us with these rate increases.
Well, I think one of the things you pointed out a couple of interviews ago, Jerry, that I think caught a lot of shippers by surprise, at least based on the response that we got, was like, wow, I never knew this, is that, for people that said, well, I don't have to worry about the increases in the accessorial charges because my accessorial charges are fixed in the contract and that contract's not up for negotiation. I think your admonition or advice to shippers was to go back and read the wording in their contract that would specify that the accessorial charge that will apply is the rate that was in effect at the time of shipment.
Correct.
Not at the time the contract was signed.
That is correct. It's the date of shipment. It's not the date the contract signed.
Unless you've negotiated it otherwise, but that's not something I would imagine FedEx and UPS are too eager to give on.
Not very often. You've got to be a really big shipper to get that kind of concession.
Okay, so 2 other points, Jerry. First of all, we saw something happen during the peak of COVID, where they basically, both FedEx and UPS had basically programs that were designed to really, I may be grossly oversimplifying it here, but were designed to limit the volume from high volume shippers. And if those volumes were exceeded, if they allowed it, those packages would travel at a premium. They would not travel at the base price. I bring that up because one of the articles that I've been reading says that this peak season for Parcel, AKA the period between Thanksgiving and Christmas Day, there will be substantially more capacity in the networks than in previous years, which may mean that FedEx and UPS may actually be looking for more business as opposed to putting caps on the business that they're receiving from large shippers. Can you walk us through what's going on there?
Well, that's my expectation for this year, is that I don't think there'll be any capacity issues. I could be wrong, but the biggest single factor will be weather. If there's an extraordinary weather event, let's say a lot of snow in New England and so forth, then they can moderate volume in particular areas and tell shippers we can't take any more business from a particular area. And they've done that in the past and just throttle it back. The other thing that the listener needs to be aware of, and there's not much they can do about it other than to make sure that they have an open dialogue with the regional carriers and with whatever competitors. So if they're using FedEx, make sure they have an open dialogue with UPS. Is that you've read about it in the papers? There's some labor issues going on between Federal Express and the ground contractors for their ground service. And that could manifest itself into an interruption in service, especially in the Black Friday area. So you need an outlet if you're especially an e-commerce shipper. What will happen if there is a labor interruption? UPS we put off till next year, and they'll be in negotiations with the Teamsters next year. But FedEx has got some festering issues right now.
Well, that brings me to the next question, Jerry. You know, right now, one of the things we alerted people to in a recent 2-minute warning was the fact that the contract with UPS and its unions expires, I think, around June 30th or that time frame.
Right.
And the other point that's noteworthy is that the president of the union, who is new to that position, has let it be known that he thinks that perhaps the associates in the union should be getting perhaps better terms, that a lot of the profitability that UPS and FedEx have experienced have come based on the backs of the union workers there. Do you sense the potential for contentious negotiations? I mentioned that because I think one of the other things he said is we're not going to even begin to negotiate this agreement until May.
Right.
Is that more bluster, or what do you see happening with UPS negotiations?
Well, I don't personally see a work stoppage at UPS for a number of reasons. Now, is it a good time for the Teamsters to negotiate? You bet. Volume has been great. The profits at UPS have been fantastic for several years now, and they can do no wrong. But the other thing that's coming is that volume, we're already seeing it declining. I expect it to decline some more as we go further into the recession. And as volume declines, then UPS will struggle, as will FedEx, to take costs out. And you can't, it's difficult to take costs out if you are giving big increases to the drivers or some of the other things that they should be seeking going forward. But the other thing is that UPS is now so integral to the operation of the economy. I can't see the powers that be in Washington allowing the UPS to go on strike. They would put an injunction in and make them go back to the negotiating table for a while.
Okay, but they don't have that kind of capacity, do they? I mean, in '97 they didn't do that. And do they have that kind of, it's not like the railroads where the Congress can order them back to work, can they?
Well, there were a lot more alternatives back in '97. For example, Airborne was handling domestic business. DHL was handling domestic business. I think Purolator was still handling, or Emery was still handling domestic business. So now we're down to 2 players. And I just can't see the Secretary of Transportation sitting back and allowing them to work, you know.
Okay.
So can I give you a couple of ideas so we can close?
You bet. That's
So-
exactly what I was going to ask for.
You touched on this. So number one, the increases are very complicated, so you need help. And this is a Transact broadcast. Call Transact and they can analyze your business for you. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. What's negotiable? As you said, everything. But you got to know what's important to your mix of business and push there in the hardest in the areas where your business is most affected by these changes. Don't overlook anything. Go into negotiations with a wish list. So the GRI cap, the minimum charge reduction, the accessorial charges that are important to you, residential delivery, delivery area surcharge, oversized fees, additional handling, all of those things. Make a list. Make sure you cover all of them. Because if you don't ask, your sales rep ain't gonna bring it up and volunteer the discount. Entertain the regional carriers. So now we have a mega regional carrier with the marriage of Lasership and OnTrack that can handle, and they've connected the 2 networks together, the west coast of OnTrack, the east coast of Lasership, and Lasership is expanding into Texas. So the 2 huge footprints. You need to at least be talking to OnTrack / Lasership, but there are other regional carriers, and so that you have a backup or a more prudently priced alternative to get your packages delivered. Lastly, stay plugged in, because what if one or more of the carriers has some kind of job action between now and the new year? You need to know what to do and plan for it.
One of the final thoughts that we have been trying to help people understand is how the parcel markets work. For example, when we were looking like a rail strike was imminent, a lot of people were like, well, we're not rail shippers, we don't have anything to worry about. Well, what they didn't understand is UPS is, I think, BNSF's largest customer.
Largest customer.
Yeah, and so we were like, those intermodal packages, they're on a train. And so the other aspect too, Jerry, that I would just encourage our listeners to think through, you've really helped open our eyes, and there are some wonderful people out there, a bunch of them that have been very, very good. And so we're really trying to spread the word that, like you said, the negotiations are critically important. And one thing I would just like a final thought on, I was talking with a very, very, very large UPS shipper, and the one of the points that we didn't get into, and we don't need to now, but UPS has been very aggressive in taking cost out of their system over the past couple of years. And so when you said, from a carrier's perspective, I think they're pretty widely respected for doing a good job of managing costs. So it's not like there's a lot of extra in there.
Right.
So going into this negotiations, one of my friends, John, large UPS shipper, drew on his wish list, said, these are the things that were really important to his company. And these are the things that, are likely to be important for UPS. And so kind of like a trade, like a draft choice. I'll take this, you take that. Well, as it turned out for him, one of the things that was exceptionally important for him and his company was protecting the dim factors. And that was something that, was nuanced, and, UPS understood the value, and they came back and said, well, this is what's really important to us. And so the reason I bring that up, if you could just comment on this, is the give and take in these negotiations are critically important, more so, I think, than over the past, prior to COVID type stuff, because these carriers know the business they want and the price that they want to have that business move at. Is that a fairly accurate summation of a good approach to negotiations?
Yes, and you have to, because the carriers have all the data, and they've maintained the data forever. So they know all about your business. If you are not armed with that information, either getting it yourself or using a third party like Transact to develop your information and condense it into information. So it's not just data, it's information. You're going to go into the negotiations with a blindfold and handcuffs. You have to know what's important to your business and what the value is to you of for example, changing a dim factor.
Well, and then that's just final thought there. I keep mentioning that, but with our parcel reporting toolbox, one of the exercises that you've helped us with, by the way, is if a shipper says, here's 5 things that are really important to us, we say, okay, you get 4. Which one are you going to remove? Then you get 3. Which one are you going to remove? And, obviously you go down to 3, 2, and that really helps them prioritize the give and take, what's critically important for them to maintain. So those accessorial charges, years ago, I think you said that for UPS and FedEx, approximately 35 to 40% of their revenue stream was associated with accessorial charges. I wonder what that would be today.
Well, just take fuel alone. Forget the other 87 accessorial charges that they have. Take fuel. Currently, FedEx Ground is 17 point something percent, 17%. If you look at international shipments, it's over 20% for UPS and FedEx for the fuel, and DHL is charging 21.5. So layer on top of that all the accessorial charges, and they apply the fuel surcharge to the accessorial charge.
Wow.
It gets really, that's why people need Transact, is to sort through that. And what accessorial charges am I using? Transact knows that. Now you could probably call your FedEx rep and give me a list of all of the accessorial charges you charged me last year and what the frequency was and how much you charged me for that. And those reports are out there and available, but your shippers, your customers are not going to be savvy enough for the most part to know that they could ask their sales rep to produce a document with the list of accessorials, and then they could rank them. Which one do I use most frequently and which one costs me the most? And there can be a difference.
Well, and that's where I came up with that, prioritize the things that are most important to you.
Right.
With John, protecting his company's dim factors was critically important in light of the changes that,
DIM
UPS
is still a big deal.
Yeah. Jerry, I can't thank you enough. This has really been informative. And I know you're not on the beach, but that's a nice background anyway, but you are in Orlando. So having survived Hurricane Ian. So thanks so much for your time.
Take care, Michael.